welcome back to Sharks Happen. My name is Hal. I'm your host, going over shark attacks from the 1900s till present, mostly large sharks, and we're going to get started over at Tea Gardens, which is in New South Wales, Australia. The date is May 11th, 1957. Leonard Higgins is 28 years old. He is participating in a spearfishing competition, and it's around noon. He is swimming, I think, back to shore, and he's about 300 yards from shore, but he's 20 yards from a nearby island. He's 10 feet deep in the water. I don't know how deep the water is, but he's 10 feet down, it sounds like, and he's hit and pushed through the water. About 3 feet, he said he's pushed through the water. He's hitting the right side, and he said the shark wasn't interested in eating him because it just bit him and let him go. So he ended up with wounds on his right side to his hip and to his torso and upper leg, but they don't know which ones were abrasions and bites. They said that this was a 15-foot either blue whaler, which blue whaler, I would think they're talking about a mako in that case, because I've never heard of blue whaler. So maybe over there you can let me know what a blue whaler is. And then the other one they said is a 15-foot tiger shark. So a large shark got a hold of them, and you know, like most of the time, they didn't want to do anything, just bit them once and went on its way. If that was a 15-foot tiger shark, it definitely just was a, you know, territorial bite and head out the other way. Mistaken ID bite, something. It wasn't interested in eating them. Wasn't interested in the fish either. We go over this, I don't know how many times where they have fish around and they're not interested in the fish, they're interested in the people. So it's an attack, not an attempt to predate. He was taken in and fixed up at the hospital. There was no removal of any flesh that I've heard of, and it doesn't sound like it got any arteries, so they probably sewed him up, and he was good to go and had a great story to be able to tell later on to his family. That's our story of Leonard Higgins. Attack, not an attempt to predate. Okay, now we head over to Chatswood, which is in Sydney Harbour in Australia. The date is January 10th, 1903. Stanley James, he's 29 years old. He and his two younger brothers are out and they're bathing, they say, in deep waters. So they're out by a moored boat that's empty. So there's a boat that's moored out off the shore, and they're out swimming by it bathing. Suddenly, Stanley hears a splash, and seconds later, he feels a clamping on his upper thigh. So he knows right away that a shark's got him, and he's in a fight against this shark. Shark's got him by the leg. He makes his way over to that moored boat. His brothers, I guess, swam to shore. I haven't seen what the two brothers ended up doing. I'm assuming they swam to shore, but he made his way over to that moored boat and grabbed onto the boat. Now, there's a couple fishermen that are in the area, and they see that the kid is hanging onto the boat and something's got him by the leg. They're probably seeing the tugging motion, and they're making their way over to the kid now. So Stanley's still hanging by the boat. The fishermen make their way over, and when they get there, they get Stanley up onto their boat. They take him to shore. He gets into shore. They get medical attention to him there, put him in an ambulance, and he takes the ambulance ride to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, he's at first alert. He's able to tell the whole story of what happened with him and the shark. He ends up going comatose just before they reach the hospital, and he didn't make it. He passed away from his wounds. Two dogs had been killed by sharks in this same spot in the prior weeks. Two different dogs ended up being killed. And then they also say that that area they were swimming in is just badly infested with sharks at the time. So not a surprise that it happened. We're going to put this one down as an attack and an attempt to predate, a fatality. And that's our story. And we're going to move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to West Beach, which is in Adelaide, South Australia. The date, March 18th, 1926. Primrose Whyte, she's a famous swimming instructor, and she's got a bunch of kids that she's ready to give a class to. She tells them that she's going to go for a swim first, and at 3:45 she's out swimming just about 25 yards from a jetty, and she's attacked by a shark. A boat comes over that saw her get attacked, gets her up onto the boat. Only took the boat, I think they say 2 minutes to get the boat to her, and then 2 minutes to get to shore. And in those 4 minutes, she ended up bleeding out, because by the time they got her onto the beach and into some towels, there was no blood coming onto the towels. She had bled out when she was in the boat. The shark swam around for about 15 minutes afterwards, people were trying to, shoot at the shark to no avail. Some were saying it was a ground shark or a 7-gill shark. Kind of an odd species to be attacking anybody. I don't think that there's a lot of those that isn't on a diver that's messed with it first. It's one of those that probably isn't going to mess with you if you mess with it. And marine biologists at the time, they were also not buying into that it was a 7-gill shark. They think it was maybe a 3.7 meter great white shark. So you're talking a 10-footer, 10.5-foot great white, probably responsible for that attack. It ended up removing her thigh in the front, and it removed her whole right buttock. So I think it removed her left thigh all in the front, exposing the bone, and then her whole right buttock was removed, exposing bone also. Those were the major wounds that she ended up losing the blood. And also they said the artery, they couldn't see the artery, so it either retracted or it was bitten off, severed higher up. But they couldn't even find that to be able to, go ahead and do what they have to do to stop the bleeding. It was just retracted somewhere. So a pretty bad attack. It sounds like they got 2 minutes to get there. Sounds like a lifetime when you're being attacked, but it's pretty quick to get there. And swimmers probably take about as long to get to their buddies that are only 20, 30 yards away because of waves and how you have to swim over there. So not too long of a time to get over there. We're going to put it down as an attack, an attempt to predate. We just don't know about what kind of shark. And then we're going to head over to the Bahamas, to Atoll Island. The date is June 2nd, 2017. Tiffany Johnson and her husband are out and they're enjoying the last day of their vacation. They're at Atoll Island and they decided they are going to go and do some snorkeling. At the time, it's around noon, and Tiffany is floating in the water, just floating on top of the water, probably looking towards her husband, I would think. Off to her left, her husband is just swimming to the boat to get up out of the boat. He's done with his swim, and she's probably going to get out shortly. But she's sitting there looking off to the left and feels something on her right arm. And not pain from a bite, just some pressure, like a tug. So she turns to the right and she looks, and she's looking at a shark. And she's looking at her arm in the shark's mouth. And now she tugs to try to get her arm away, and the shark bites down harder. So the shark clamps even harder. When she tugged the first time, she tugged again. She's screaming to her husband now, who's now climbing up the ladder, hears his wife screaming, and she's yelling, "Help me." He turns around and looks, and he sees blood all over it in the water. He dives in and starts swimming over, and she gives another couple tugs, and on that last tug, the shark just bit down and bit her arm off. And that freed her. The shark didn't do any shaking, didn't do any movements, just sat there with her arm in its mouth, probably looking at her. And as soon as the arm was severed, her husband had gotten to her and took her back to the boat and helped her up the ladder. Shark didn't bother following them, just left them all be. And she gets in and she gets helped. She ends up surviving. She says it's a tiger shark. We don't know what size tiger shark. We're going to put this down as an attack and not an attempt to predate. Okay, now we're going to head over to Lookout Beach, which is in South Africa. The date is June 26th, 2015. Dylan Reddering is 23 years old and he's out doing some surfing. Doesn't say how far from shore he is. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And he must be laying on his board because he's hit from underneath and grabbed by the shark and pulled under. He says that he beat on the shark and then he went and swam his way to shore from there. But he got tied up. The tide kept him from making it any further, and 4 other surfers came over and helped him get to shore. He was bitten up pretty bad by the shark. It was a 2 to 3 meter shark, so you're talking anywhere from 7 to 11 foot shark. So it's, a juvenile white like it normally is with these boards. But this one bit him a few times. He had a bite to his leg, to his hip, and to his torso, and his buttocks. So he was bitten probably at least twice. And didn't do any removal of any tissue and didn't sever any arteries, so luckily he just had to be stitched up from the bites. But a multiple bite on one of these, that's kind of unusual. We don't hear about that a lot. Usually it's the one clamp and the person hits them and they release and they disappear. Well, this one, bit him a couple times. We've had a few of these sharks that'll chew on somebody but not remove anything and just let them go. Sometimes they're fatal, sometimes they're not. Luckily, this one is not fatal. They took him in and they were able to get him fixed up. We're going to put this down as an attack, not an attempt to predate by a 2 to 3 meter great white shark. Okay, now we're going to head over and finish out our unprovoked attacks over in Oregon. We're going to go to Indian Beach, and the date is October 10th, 2016. Joseph Tanner is 29 years old, and he is out doing some surfing. He's out in the water, and it sounds like he's on his board, maybe laying on his board, maybe waiting for a wave. He's got another gentleman named SG. Name was withheld, so they just call him SG. But this gentleman's 10 feet, about 10 feet from Joseph, and it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And he says that Joseph slips off his board, but it looked odd the way that he slipped off his board. So he said over to him, is everything okay? He says just about that time he could see the body of a shark come up out of the water. He says he could see about 8 feet of the body, but he couldn't see the tail. So this shark is bigger than 8 feet, probably bigger than 10 feet, that grabbed him off of his board. Now, when Joseph's under the water, he opens his eyes, and the shark still got him by the leg. He can see the gills, so he punches at the gills. And as soon as he does that, the shark releases him. He gets back up on his board. He had yelled to everybody as soon as he got attacked. He came back up to the water after it attacked him, and he punched the shark and got up there, told them all to get out of the water. Everybody's getting out of the water, and he paddles his way into shore. He is a nurse by trade, and he gave instructions for the people how to staunch the bleeding and care for it while he was on the beach waiting for the medics to get there. He ends up surviving this attack. The wounds look like they were pretty bad to begin with. It sounds like it's just one bite, because they said a 26-inch diameter of a bite, which it sounds like his leg was kind of bent when he was bitten, because it goes from the lower thigh. I think that's just one bite that got him in the upper thigh and the lower leg, and his leg might have been bent when it was bit. Because of the way that they talked about the radius on it. But either way, I'm going to post a link to this story. It shows when he's sewn up. You can see the damage and how big those teeth, you can tell that it's 1 or 2 teeth that went in at this spot, and how big that cut is. It's just, it's a monstrous cut. I'd hate to have that, and it runs down his leg. So I'll post that link to that. We're going to put this down as an attack, and again, not an attempt to predate. By a great white. I do believe there was, some question as to what the shark was. They didn't know what it was, but it's in Oregon, and those whites are in that water all the time. I'm not sure if they have any kind of like bulls up there. You know that there's not going to be tigers in that cold water, but I don't know about bulls if it's too cold. Like I said, that's why I want water temperature. I want to see cutoffs for where these fish tend to be and where they tend not to be when certain temperatures are in certain places. That's our attack on Joseph Tanner, and we'll move on with the rest of the show. Okay, we're going to finish the show with You Don't Hear That Every Day. Before we get around to that, I wanted to get into a couple of items. People have been bringing these up with the sharks, especially the great white. The great white loves, fish like to come up behind other bait and other fish, I think, in general, when they're feeding. But the great white seems to make sure, even with us slow-moving humans, that it finds out where behind us is, because you hear all the time, so watch your six. This comes up all the time with people, if a white's coming at you, it's coming at you from somewhere you can't tell. And that brings me to the point I wanted to make, where this is a shark that, on regular occasions will put its head out of the water and look at stuff out of the water. And this means 2 things to me. I mean, other sharks breach and they see this on a different kind of a scale, but this is a different level that this great white does it, and that's why I think it's so much more intelligent, that it knows that when its head is out of the water, it's difficult to see anything down in the water. This shark knows that more than any other shark. It's got its head out of the water. It also knows if you want to see out of the water, have its head out of the water. So it'll pop its head out of the water to look out of the water. It knows where it can see best. And I think that this is why most attacks are at the surface. And I would love to see some kind of a test or some kind of a study on that, because I think these sharks know that when the humans' heads are above the water, they can't really see them coming. They're 20 feet sometimes, and you can't see these things. They sneak up on you. They're hitting you without you knowing. I mean, that's a crazy thing to be that size and not to be spotted before you're hit most of the time. I mean, just insane. Even with we had the one story where the spear fisherman was down there, and they were in a V. The spear fishermen were in a V, and the gentleman in the front was turned around facing his buddies, and their eyes all popped up. He came up behind the only guy that had his back turned to him, and I believe it bit him in the leg when it came up behind him. And you know, these sharks just continuously come up behind you. So that's one thing, is keep an eye out in all directions, because if a shark, great white's going to come at you, it ain't going to come from where you can see. And when your head's above water, that's when you're going to be at the worst position, because you can't really see down into the water as well, reflection from the light. So when your head's underwater, though, you can see it. And I still think that if you see a shark and you keep, like in the reef where he keeps keeping his eye on that shark, it'll make that shark pause from coming and getting you. I do believe that. Once a shark comes to get you, all you got to do is, all you can do is fight as much as you can. So that's our story on that. Another thing I wanted to bring up, dolphins. Somebody sent me a video on a dolphin. A gentleman sent me this last week, and I watched this, and a dolphin's attacked by a great white. I think it's a great white. I mean, it's a shark that's eating a dolphin. The thing is, it's just right next to the beach. I mean, the beach is here, and the shark is attacking it right next to the beach. I'm shocked at how close to the beach it is. The dolphin even tries to jump up onto the sand, but the shark keeps him from doing it. But while this is going on, there's this guy that was out there, and he had seen the dolphin, and he wanted to swim with the dolphin. So this guy jumped into the water. This dolphin's being eaten, and this guy is out there waiting to swim with it. So, like I told the guy that sent it, I thanked him for sending me the clip. It was very interesting. And then I told him, I said, not only the fact that it's right next to the beach like it is seriously just ridiculously fascinating, but that we have a what were you thinking candidate out there in the water with them. So I wanted to get into that about dolphins. Another thing about dolphins is I watched a Malibu artist video in the last couple days. He's got a really cool one. These sharks, great whites and dolphins, a pod of dolphins are around great whites, and you can see how they don't really interact with each other, but they don't really bother each other. And he brings up a good point in that video, is that he knows that dolphins are eaten by sharks, which they are. He doesn't know how often, and I agree, I don't know how often either, but I would think it's very minimal. I think with dolphins and whales, that with the shark, it's doing its job as far as taking care of the injured, the weak, the dead and dying. So they just clean up the seas in that case with dolphins. I don't think that, maybe they could ambush one, but with that, that locating thing that they do, I don't know that dolphins could be snuck up on as easily as other fish. It's probably a lot more difficult. So I think when a dolphin's eaten by a shark, it's in an injured state. Something's wrong with it to where it's caught. Unless sharks are going to hunt like an orca, I don't think they can catch a dolphin. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was that I watched another video, and this one was crazy. And this is turtles. Beware the turtles. These turtles are not your friends. We gone over one where the guy was conch. He was collecting conch down on the seafloor, and that sea turtle swam by him. And he turns around, and that's when he saw the tiger shark was almost right up on top of him. These turtles are using people to stay safe, and I've seen it 3 times now. This one did it to him, and that guy got bit by the shark. Well, first it took his conch bag, and I think it might have bit his hand a little bit as it took his conch bag. Then it came back at him and bit him. Then we just went over the 2 surfers that are paddling their way back to shore, didn't even know a shark was around, and 4 turtles went beelining between the 2 of them. Purposely, I say, between the 2 of them, and then the one gentleman was bit in the leg. Remento, I think, Aaron Remento. We just covered it in the last show. And now I'm sent this clip, and first of all, this guy's up paddleboarding. He's Australian, I think. Could be New Zealand, but I think he's Australian. But he's paddleboarding, and he looks down, and there's a big sea turtle comes around to the side, and he looks over to the other side, and there's a big, I mean big, tiger shark there. And I say big because from the head to the dorsal, and I didn't realize this until I watched this video, from the head to the dorsal, it looked like maybe 4 to 5 feet. From that dorsal to the tail, it looked like over 7 feet. This looked like a 12-foot tiger shark next to this guy. But now the turtle keeps, and the shark will get around the board and get to the turtle, and it actually attacks at it. And the turtle makes its way to the other side of the board so that the shark comes around, and you see it lift its head out of the water and bite the board. And the guy's just filming from a GoPro. And the next thing you see is water in the bottom of the water, because it's shallow water. So he's knocked off his board by this tiger shark that is after this turtle that is using the board to keep the tiger shark from the turtle. Craziest thing I ever saw. This guy gets back on his board and starts cheering. Awesome experience. Not for me. So that's our story there. We're going to go to Sydney Harbor, I believe it is. Where is this? Dover Heights is in Sydney. I guess a suburb of Sydney. Dover Heights in 1967, in March of 1967, I think March 10th, but the unknown occupants of this car. This car breaks through a barrier, so sounds like it's up on a turn, and the brakes, they said the brakes had failed, and the car went through the barrier to keep you from crashing over the cliffs down into the water to your death. The car crashes through the barrier, and it gets lodged on some rocks 100 feet up from the ocean. Now there's people that can see through the mist that the car is hanging there. They can see that there's about 14 sharks down in the water down there. And the car sits there for 30 minutes, but the passenger, so this is passenger in the automobile devoured by sharks. The passenger, unconscious maybe, falls out into the water and is immediately devoured by the sharks that are waiting down there. Like I said, the car had sat there for a half hour before it, I believe it went into the water too, but they don't get into that as to whether that car did plunge in there. They say the car sat there for 30 minutes, but they didn't say the car went down in there. This is 1967, so if you're over in, one of my buddies over there down under, and you've heard this story in the past, let me know, because I have some questions on this. What happened to the car? Did the car go in afterwards? Did the people in the car? It said one of the people in the car were injured, 2 were killed, and she was eaten down there. And whoever fell out of the car was eaten by the sharks. So it sounds like there was 4 people in the car, 2 people dead, 1 person injured, 1 person fell out and was eaten. And I don't know whether the car went over the cliff all the way into the water or not. It doesn't sound like it. Terrible accident, terrible tragedy. That's our story for today. That's our show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll be back in a few more days. But remember, if you go into that water, you are much more afraid of those sharks than they are of you.